Welcome to the Fair Chance Praxis Partnership pre-application webinar. My name is Gina Fulbright Powell. I have the pleasure of serving as the Director of Programs here at Fair Chance. Just want to let you know that this webinar is scheduled, the content that we will be sharing is scheduled to last about 45 minutes, and then we'll have time at the end of the conversation for you all to ask questions. So if you have a question during the presentation, just jot it into the chat box. And you should see the chat box. I believe it's to the right of your screen. Our screen looks a little different than yours. One of the things I want to say at the outset, and that is the applications are due on January 8th, 2018 at 5 p.m. And we will go into some more detail around the application. We are also recording this webinar, and it will be available to you. So at the end of the conversation today, we will email a link to the webinar in case that there's information that you would like to hear repeated again. One of the things for those of you that are familiar with Fair Chance, you may notice that this word Praxis Partnership is new, and it is intentional. Over the past 2 years, Fair Chance has grown and developed additional programs for the first 15 years of Fair Chance's history. We have been offering what we used to refer to as the core partnership. So we have renamed it, and the meaning of the word praxis is very reflective of this partnership, and it means working together to improve organizational sustainability by turning theory and best practices into customized solutions. And we will talk a bit more about how that definition of praxis really plays out in our partnership. I'd like to introduce to you two very fine individuals who have been a part of Fair Chance for a number of years now. And I first would like to introduce you to Robert DeSimone, who is the Executive Director of the Youth Leadership Foundation. Robert, welcome. Thank you for joining us.
Hi, Gina. Thank you for having me.
Robert, if you could just talk a little bit about when you completed your partnership so people understand the recency of that experience.
Yeah, well, this past June, my organization was nominated by the Greater Washington's Catalog for Philanthropy as one of DC's best community-based nonprofits. And even though we got the award this past June, I think in large part it was due to the work that I did with Fair Chance in 2016. Great,
thank you very much. And you will hear, to our listening audience, you will hear much more from Rob about his experience in the partnership program. And I'd also like to introduce to you all Kristen Barney, who is one of our staff members who works directly with the nonprofit organizations in this partnership program. And we refer to the position that Kristen holds as that of a capacity builder, capacity building specialist. Kristen, welcome.
Thank you, Gina. Very glad to be here. So I've been a capacity building specialist with Fair Chance for 3 years now.
Thank you. And you will clearly hear more from Kristen as we move through the agenda. And speaking of our agenda, when you leave this webinar, we really want you to walk away with three things. One, with a clear understanding of Fair Chance, who we are, what we do, as well as the Praxis Partnership. We also want you to have gleaned from our conversation enough information so that you can present a high-quality application. And as I mentioned, in having or hearing more from Rob, he will talk about the Praxis program and offer suggestions to those of you that are interested in going down this path. So we've kind of covered the welcome and introduction. We'll also talk about the Fair Chance's mission. We'll review the Praxis Partnership and hear from Rob and Kristen as they have worked together in the partnership, what that experience was like. And last but not least, we hope that we will have piqued your interest in this partnership and that you would be interested in submitting an application, and we will talk about the application process. So in 2002, Fair Chance was established as a nonprofit, a 501c3 nonprofit organization. And as such, Fair Chance leverages the power of community-based organizations like yourselves to transform the lives of children and youth living in poverty. Each year, we select high-potential youth-serving nonprofits, and we provide them with comprehensive services that focus on the organizational competencies indicative of high-performing organizations. And we do this with the goal of having you to improve the sustainability and performance of your organization. The real a key feature of our offering is these services are of no cost to you as a participant. We just ask that you fully engage, and that engagement will be defined a little later in our conversation. So since over the past 15 years, and Fair Chance is celebrating its 15th anniversary this year, we're very excited about that. We have worked with over 100 organizations here in Washington, D.C. And we are very proud to say that over 95% of those organizations are still operating and providing services to the most underserved youth and families in our community. One of the things that you all know is that in Washington, D.C., we have nearly 1 in every 3 children in our nation's capital who live in poverty. Many of the young people living here experience some of the most pressing challenges on a daily basis, and it's nonprofits like yours that work to help young people meet and overcome these challenges. You also are probably quite aware of the fact that the greater majority of nonprofits, not only in this community but across the country, have revenues of less than $1 million. And of that number, 45% of the nonprofits are even smaller and report revenues of under $100,000. And you know that that means that organizations with this size budget struggle to meet what we know to be an ever-growing demand for services. I'm going to talk a bit more about the Praxis Partnership, and want to say that this capacity building model provides comprehensive services to improve the sustainability and the performance of community-based organizations. And these organizations are those that support our children and youth that are living in poverty. Each year, we select nonprofit organizations that have great potential, that are rooted in the communities that they serve, and are likely to benefit from our intensive and holistic capacity building approach. So when we look at the goals of the partnership, you'll look to the right of the screen and you'll see 8 organizational competencies, which are the focus of the Praxis Partnership. And we are looking for outcomes in the sense of having participated in this partnership. We're looking for organizations to increase the degree to which they have institutionalized effective practices that are indicative of high-performing nonprofits. And we are looking for at least a 25% improvement in at least 4 of these organizational competencies. Over the course of the year-long program, we expect that you will touch upon each of these, but to go deeper in 4 of those areas, and we'll talk more about that shortly. Another area that we are looking to see increases on the part of the executive directors, increases in their knowledge, skills, and competence as a leader, and also increase in the sustainability and growth of each of the organizations participating in the program. Go into this. So one of the, I've talked a bit about the growth and sustainability in our last year's annual survey of organizations that have completed the partnership in the last 5 years. We found that there was a median increase of 106% in the number of children and youth that were served. And this is from the time that they applied to the program to 5 years after. We also noted through our survey that there was a median increase in revenue of 152% during that same time frame. And we know that those 2 indicators, increasing the number of children and youth served and having the resources to do that, we know are key indicators in the sustainability of an organization. So in terms of the timeline, we are here in November. This marks the application and selection period for this program. As I mentioned, the applications are due on January 8th at 5 p.m. And that's 2018, of course. So the period that we're in now between November and January is the time that we do outreach, that we encourage people who are interested and meet our eligibility criteria to apply to this program. And after the applications are due January 8th, then we go through a process of reviewing the applications, conducting interviews, and ultimately selecting those organizations that will participate in the upcoming cohort group. So in May of 2018, we would have orientation to the program. Notifications will go out in April for those that have submitted an application. We ask you to hold that date for orientation. And then during the May-July timeframe, you complete a pre-assessment, and that pre-assessment informs the work plan. The work plan informs the work that is done between the executive director and appropriate staff as necessary, and the capacity building specialist, which is a staff person, a fair chance. And then the partnership work begins August through April. So that would be August of 2018 into and through April of 2019. And we have our celebration of all of the hard work and all of the gains that have been realized as a part of the partnership during our Fair Chance Honors Program, which is typically in April. And I'll talk a little more about the alumni support and training, which is ongoing. So network services is really the way in which we continue to engage with our partner organizations. And we have a saying around here, once a partner, always a partner. And what we are committed to is continuing the capacity, the building of your organizational capacity and your capacity as a leader beyond the completion of the Praxis Partnership. We have a relationship with the Boston Consulting Group, which is an international management consulting firm, and they provide services to our alumni in areas such as talent development. They've supported partners in board development, continuing board development. As you know, your boards are changing constantly, and they've also supported partners with some strategic planning. We also host an executive director learning community we refer to as the EDLC, and this is an opportunity to meet with the executive director of Fair Chance, Gretchen Vanderveer, who brings to the group topics that are typically related to current issues in the nonprofit community in the DC area. And this will also include bringing in guest speakers, and then the guest speakers may make a presentation, and then the executive directors stay after the presenter leaves just to talk about how the topic at hand really relates to them and how they can benefit from it. So a topic not too long ago was around financing, and it really talked about how to go about securing a line of credit. Should you have an example of this being useful is for partner organizations that we know that have contracts or grants with local jurisdictions, and there might be a delay in payments that are due, and a line of credit would help ease that pain. We also have pro bono legal counsel, and so as a partner or an alumni partner, once you've completed the program, if you have a need to, for example, have your bylaws reviewed to ensure that they're accurate and up to date, that's a possibility. If you have an HR manual that you would like legal counsel to review, that's a possibility. And there have been some instances where organizations have had some sort of dispute and needed legal counsel, and that is available through our relationship with a law firm here in town. One of the really, I think, beneficial services that we continue to offer, and that's the Executive Director e-Forum. And this is basically a listserv, and all of our executive directors are invited to participate in that. We know that oftentimes as executive directors, sometimes it gets lonely at the top, and you need to check in with other executive directors to get their advice, to get recommendations for, it could be you have a need to change accountants. You can ask the community about recommendations for highly effective and perhaps cost-efficient accounting organizations that could be of support. So you might be wondering at this time, okay, I understand all of that. And if you don't understand anything that I've said at this point, please feel free to type your question into the chat box. But what I'd like to do now is to talk a little bit more about, pardon me, what you might expect through the Praxis Partnership. So one of the things we want to be clear about, and that is, this is a one-on-one relationship between the executive director and the capacity building specialist, as I mentioned. There might be from time to time a need to engage other staff members or your board chair, depending on what the topic is. And actually, Rob and Kristen will actually give you a much better sense of what that relationship is like. As I mentioned, this is at no cost, and we talked about the benefit of participating in the network with the services that I just articulated. The partnership is not an extra staff person. This is not someone that you would, give assignments to. This is a thought partner. This is someone that will help you think through, research issues that you might be experiencing as the executive director. The partnership is also comprehensive. I talked a little earlier about the assessment and the work plan that's developed from that. And it involves weekly meetings. The meetings are typically about 2 hours face-to-face with your capacity building specialist. And we ask that you devote up to 8 hours per week, because there will be independent work. There will also, one of the things that we ask you to do in exchange for this organizational management support that is at no cost to you, is the submission of data. And that is how I was able to recite to you the percentage of increases in the number of children and youth served and the amount of revenue earned. So the partnership itself is rewarding and transformative, and I'm going to ask Rob to share his quote with you.
Sure, Gina. The best way I could summarize my experience with Fair Chance is I would say that before my work with Fair Chance, I knew I was facing major organizational challenges, including multi-year operating deficits. And then after the partnership, I was prepared to lead my organization to solutions. And the results are evident. We've got consecutive 5-digit operating surpluses for the first time in YLF's 20-year history.
That is huge. And so without further ado, I am going to ask Kristen to lead a conversation with Rob to actually bring to life for you an actual example of how the partnership works. Kristen?
Thank you, Gina. Rob, it's great to have you here. We have sat together for an entire year from May 2016 through April 2017. And you preferred to come here to the Fair Chance office to have our meetings. Sometimes partners prefer to have the meetings at their office. I remember you said to me that you liked coming here because you could think more freely and more openly. So everyone does it differently, and we had a lot of really long conversations and did a lot of hard work together. So glad to be with you again. And I wanted to just ask you, could you explain, or please briefly share about the Youth Leadership Foundation?
Well, thank you, Kristen. I just want to say it was a lot of hard work, and for that precise reason, it's a pleasure to be here today. The Youth Leadership Foundation has been in Washington, D.C. since 1997. We build character for youth in the nation's capital. We have a boys program and a girls program, and we primarily are offering character building and academic enrichment programs for youth after school Saturdays and during summers. And our impact speaks for itself. We've recently did a study and found out that in a peer-to-peer comparison, our students outperform their peers on 7 of 8 key measures of post-secondary success.
Great, thank you very much. So why did you apply for the Praxis Partnership?
The Praxis Partnership coincided with, I was just 12 months into my tenureship as executive director. And the entire reason I came to the Youth Leadership Foundation is because it was out of a sincere desire that I really wanted to do more to help inner city kids, and I wanted to have a bigger impact. And when I got to YLF, I saw programs that I thought could have a much bigger impact on youth in DC, but I didn't know how to do it. So I turned to outsiders for help, and Fair Chance was one of the Praxis Partnership through Fair Chance was one of the routes that I pursued.
Great. What were some of the organizational competencies that you knew needed to be addressed?
Yeah, so we mentioned the multi-year operating deficits. Concretely, we're talking about $150,000. So I knew that there was a financial management issue that we had. Also, when you have a deficit, I realized that there was a fundraising issue that we had because we just weren't getting to capacity. Also, my board had said that you're the best secret in Washington, D.C., and I said, well, that's not really a good thing. You probably want a little more communications and visibility. And even on the staffing level, I didn't think we had a really good leadership development plan in place, and I was wondering how we were going to keep some of the rising stars in our organization. And beyond that, there were even some program evaluation issues in terms of we were always very anecdotally based and talked about the number of kids we served, and funders would come to us and say, we don't care, we want to know what your impact is. And when we said we don't know, it contributed to the deficit. So everything was intertwined, and I really knew that there was a lot of these areas that we needed to do a deep dive in if we were to transform the organization.
That's great, Rob. Thank you. And I can just add to that or piggyback on that by saying that's can be a typical situation for nonprofits, is a little bit of a catch-22, is how do I improve in my fundraising without my program evaluation, and how do I improve in my program evaluation without fundraising? So we sort of work on, and it's typical in a capacity building relationship that we're working on several fronts so that you can get what you need in different areas to move forward in other areas. So can you tell a little bit more concretely, how did we work together when we met each week, and what was the relationship like?
Yeah, so I would say that there's a bit of art and science to working with the capacity building specialist. And what I mean by that, there's the art of it is, I would say there's an art of humility. I mean, I think as executive directors, we have the last word in a lot of things with our organization. And sometimes it's hard to be humble, but I always approached it that Kristen had a lot to give me if I was willing to receive it. So I think that attitude is a really important piece of it. The science of it, though, is what did we do when we were working together? And again, coming from the perspective that she had a lot to give me, whenever there was an assignment, I made sure that I was dedicating all the time that I could to that assignment. I came prepared for our meetings. It was always synthesized because I wanted to make sure I was addressing the most important issues with Kristen. And whenever we had, whenever there were follow-ups on those meetings, I would prioritize those things first on my to-do list for the week. So that way I was really integrating what I was learning from the partnership into the workflow at YLF.
Fantastic. And I'll add a little bit too. I think there's kind of three things that are happening. The executive director is, of course, learning from the capacity building specialist. On some occasions, I was bringing new information to you. From my bird's eye perspective, having worked with many different organizations over the years. But I think what really makes the partnership special is that I'm also learning from you. There are things that you know about Washington, D.C., about youth, about the particular program that you have and where you're planning to go with the program. So I'm learning from you. And then there's a third piece, which is we learn together. Sometimes we're actually going into uncharted territory on some topic, and we figure things out together. So I would just describe the partnership that way. Would you agree with that?
Absolutely, wholeheartedly. I think especially that going into uncharted territory piece. I felt like a lot of times, at least in our partnership, there was some real leadership that the organization was needed. And neither you nor I knew exactly how that was going to turn out. But I think it was from the strength that we both offer each other that ultimately we're able to do the best thing for the students that YLF serves.
So you spoke to this a little bit already. How did you manage to find the time for this effort in addition to everything else you do as executive director?
Yeah, so I think three things come to mind. I'll speak to all of them. One is to not be insane. Two is to be the very hungry caterpillar. And three is to reduce your cognitive load. And I can obviously explain all these things.
Yes, please do.
When I say don't be insane, so the definition of insanity is doing the same thing and expecting different results. So if you want to have some kind of transformative change, that you want your organization to experience, it's going to require a different allocation of your time and a different investment of your time. So the first thing I said to myself is, okay, I may think there are other priorities, but I've just got to suck it up and realize that this partnership is only here for a certain amount of time, and I had to make time for it. So that was the first piece, is just, get used to it, suck it up, make the time for it. But then there's the very hungry caterpillar piece. I admit I may be impacted by the fact that I read the very hungry caterpillar on a daily basis to my little ones. If you recall the story, it's all about the very hungry caterpillar eats a peach and then 2 apples and then 3 pears, all the way till Saturday, where he's eating ice cream and cookies and crackers and pretzels and all this junk, and then he needs to take Sunday off to eat the green leaf. And I think as executive directors, one thing we don't realize is how much of our time we actually waste. And so, taking the advice of the very hungry caterpillar, I realized there were probably things in that Saturday diet that I didn't need, and that fair chance was the green leaf. So I think you do have to take a look at your schedule and just lop off 20% of it, give it the fair chance, and either delegate the rest or realize that you're wasting 20% of your time some other way. And then in terms of cognitive load, I'll also say something else, that there was an interesting study that they did at Stanford University where they took a group of people and they asked them to memorize 3 numbers, and they told them, and as you wait to tell us your memorization, you can either have an apple or an orange. And they also took a group of people and they said you can memorize 7 numbers, and then we're going to ask you, and then as you wait, you can have an apple or orange. Well, the people that memorized 3 numbers, all of them ended up taking the orange as they waited because it was a healthy alternative. The 7 people that were waiting ended up taking the brownie or the cookie as they were waiting. And I say that because I think fair chance is also an opportunity to just reduce your cognitive load. It'll focus you and say, look, if it's a struggle to put time into this partnership, and that's something to bring to the partnership, and they'll say, hey, you need to put these 3 things on your plate, and the other things, just take them off. They're not a priority.
Fantastic. Thank you, Rob. So the comment I want to make there is some of the work that you will need to do during the Fair Chance Partnership, which Gina said is based on a work plan that we will create. The capacity builder makes a draft of it, we review it, and so the executive director has a chance to really be part of creating that. And that's based on the assessment. And we spend quite a bit of time on the assessment. You could see from the timeline that Gina showed earlier. We spend a good 2 months, sometimes even more, sometimes a little less, depending on the leader, really going through deeply the 8 areas of organizational competency that we work in. And so the work that you end up doing during the remainder of the partnership is the work that you need to do anyway, that you may not know how to do, you haven't found time to do, you may not have had the agreement of other people in the organization to do it, you may not have had the resources to do it. So it isn't that we're giving you busy work, which I know you weren't saying that, but I just want everyone on the webinar to understand it's work that needs to be done, and we help you figure out how to get it done. I also as you were talking, Rob, and you gave this wonderful organized presentation, every leader is very different. And Rob, I would say that you are a little more on the analytical, strategic end of what is a leader like. I've worked with other leaders that are storytellers, and they think and they process and they communicate through storytelling. So whatever the leader is like, I work with you as you are and bring out the strengths and build upon the strengths of who you are. I'm not trying to, we capacity builders are not trying to change who you are, but just help you further bring out your strengths, and sometimes round out. Maybe there's a piece that's sort of a balancing piece that you need. So let me ask you another question. What role did your board play, and how has it influenced their involvement in the organization beyond the partnership?
Yeah, so one of the areas that we identified in our assessment of the 8 areas was board development. and particularly there was the YLF board was very centralized, and we wanted to decentralize it. And so during the partnership, it took a lot of one-on-one conversations to really see where people's engagement and affinities lay within the YLF board. And post-partnership, each board member now has their own delegated role, and they each own a little piece of the organization, and that's really helped to improve their engagement and improve our board participation.
Great. So could you just say briefly, what do you think are the top 3 benefits of the partnership?
Yeah, I think, for me, it's the 8 areas. I mean, what we do actually now at YLF is we score ourselves as an organization across the 8 areas, and every quarter it's almost a litmus test to see where we need to be. And so it helps us to level set our responsibilities and make sure that we're staying current on each one of the best practice areas that we need to be, and it's also a means of constantly innovating the organization to make sure that we really are, one of the best in our service area in the district.
Great, thank you. And what do you, as far as participating in the other parts of what Fair Chance offers, the network services, the e-forum, the Executive Director Learning Community, what have the indirect impacts been of receiving those other benefits?
Yeah, so I think the Executive Director Learning Committee was really important. I've been able to participate in several of them since then, and actually Gina spoke before about the last one was about finances and getting a line of credit. It was actually from what I learned at that learning community that YLF got its own line of credit, and so there are benefits to just continuing to stay in the loop that are very important. And I'll even add too that a lot of the discussion at the last couple communities has been around how this nonprofit network that Fair Chance has can do better about collaborating and trying to advocate for the youth that we serve. And I've certainly been all ears to trying to be a participant in that, because I do think that probably the most untapped part of the partnership is what we all can learn from each other, and how we can, I would say, work together to try and have a better impact on the youth that, and in some cases, the same youth that many of us are serving.
Wonderful. Thank you very much. And we will have a Q&A period at the end, so if any participants have particular questions for Rob, we'll have a chance for that later.
Okay. Thank you. Kristen and Rob, thank you very much. That was very informative. I really enjoyed hearing your analogies, and that's very nicely done. Thank you. So we are winding up the conversation here, and I just want to take a few minutes to talk, pardon me, about the eligibility requirements. And of course, we work exclusively with nonprofit 501c3 organizations. We require the executive director to be full-time, and that means 40 hours a week committed to the organization, and that's whether it's paid or unpaid. We are looking for organizations that have at least 3 board members, and of that board makeup, the board chair is not the executive director. We're looking for the executive director to have been in place in their position for at least 6 months by January 8th, 2018, as it's important that the executive director really have a pretty good sense of the organization, and that the executive director commits to the requirements of the partnership, and that the board chair is committed to the ED's participation. As far as the type of organizations that we're looking for those who have a program that has been in operation for at least a year. The mission or at least one of the program addresses the needs of children, youth, and we've expanded it recently to parents and guardians of dependents ages up to 24 that are living in poverty. For priority consideration, meaning that all of the other eligibility requirements are met, we would really like to see in our mix of the portfolio organizations that serve at least 50% of young people that are DC residents living in poverty, and that the organization has the resources needed to continue operations for the next year. Now, we know that some organizations are affiliates or chapters of national organizations, and we have special requirements for those, and those are listed in our eligibility requirements. I won't go into that now, as I want to ensure that we have time. We have time to have time for you to ask questions. And so the application, of course, has details around the requirements that I've just skipped over and all of the other requirements. Now, for the actual application, that is, I think, really articulated well at the beginning of the application and in the outreach material that we have sent out, and we want you to be sure that you meet the eligibility requirements. One of the things that we do initially in reviewing the application is do that go through the eligibility checklist. And of course, standard organizational, standard information that you probably complete for any application or grant application, contact information, overview of the organization, the description of your programs, participant data. And again, the participant data is important to help us get a sense of who you're serving, but it also is data that we use to compare once you've been in the completed the program, to provide that data that I shared a little earlier. Your organizational structure, finances, and your capacity building needs. So we have a number of attachments that are required, and you see those listed, and they're listed in the all information that we've provided to you regarding the application. All of these attachments help us get a clear, better picture of your organization and your strengths and where you might like to build from. Again, as I mentioned, it's required that the board chair be supportive of you as executive director in this program, and we ask that commitment be documented through what we refer to as an affirmation of board support form. Again, the application deadline is Monday, January 8th, 2018 at 5 p.m. And again, we will send this slide deck out to you, so you will have this information at hand. If you have any questions, please submit those to Anjali Nagpal, and you see her email address and telephone number there on the screen. We are now looking at our chat box to see if you have any questions that you might like to ask. And that could be, you can ask that of any of us that have spoken, or just general questions. So please enter any questions that you have into the chat box.
While we're waiting for people to write questions, take a couple of minutes. I just want to emphasize something that Gina said. Please work when you make the application, please work from the application and not from this PowerPoint or the webinar, because we have summarized some of the requirements a little bit for the webinar. So really go from, use the application material that is provided online. I also wanted to ask Gina. Gina, you were originally on the board of Fair Chance some years ago and left and went away and came back to Fair Chance. Why did you come back to Fair Chance as our program director?
Kristen, I have always been an admirer of the mission of Fair Chance, and not only the mission but the model. Having come from a government background, I know that oftentimes organizations aren't really willing to be honest about what their challenges are, and the fact that Fair Chance does not grant funds, which sometimes is viewed as a carrot and a stick, but offer the services without charge, I just think is a very, very effective model, and we really need the support of we really need to support organizations that support the numerous children, too many children that are living in poverty here in the city. So I see a question. Have you ever given the grant to organization that has been around for years but don't have a full-time executive director? The reason that we ask that the executive director work full-time is because, as Rob so eloquently described, this is a huge time commitment. It's an 8-hour-a-week commitment, and we have found over the years that the model works much better for those that are engaged in full-time support of the organization as the executive director. I don't know, Rob or Kristen, if you want to add anything there.
Yeah, I'll add something. I agree with Gina. That's exactly the reason. It is a big commitment, and we just, because we're making a big investment. You know, having someone, the capacity builder is also putting in about 8 hours a week. And so we're making a huge investment, and we want to invest in organizations that are ready to really kind of take their organization to the next level. And so that's, we want, ultimately it's to benefit children and youth. So that's what we're looking for in the organization.
Okay, so hopefully that answered that question, and we invite others to ask any additional questions.
In the meantime, Rob, are there any kind of closing comments that you would like to make about why somebody should apply for the Fair Chance Partnership?
Yeah, I think, you know, and pardon me for just one more analogy, but it just fits so well. There's a book by a psychologist named Robert Klein where he observed firefighters, and he asked them, why is it most people in a burning building, they get out hours before it collapses? Well, firefighters, they're in there, and they almost up to the second know how many lives they can save before they have to get out of the building. And when he asked the firefighters why they did that, he told them it's just your intuition. You know, I just know. But when he probed deeper, what he found out is that firefighters knew from their experience that visibility peaks right before the building collapses, the fire turns a little bit bluish, and that the temperature in their boots also spike. And when those three things happen, they kind of know to jet. And I just say that because the 8 areas kind of prepare the executive director to be that firefighter. You will know from those 8 areas, you'll notice which one's spiking and which one to address.
Great. Thank you, Rob.
Great. So thank you. We have another question, which is about the meaning of the word praxis, which is a great question. And we recently changed the name of the partnership to Praxis. In recent years, Fair Chance has expanded its program. We used to only have the Fair Chance Partnership, and now we have some other programs as well. So we wanted to have something really kind of particular for the name of the partnership, this year-long partnership. And the meaning that we have for it is working together to improve organizational sustainability by turning theory and best practices into customized solutions. So Praxis, if you look it up in the dictionary, it's really about applying theory in practice. And so it is not an academic exercise where you are doing things that that you'll never apply. It is about applying every day, applying what you're learning every day. And we use the principles of adult learning, which is that adults like to learn best by doing, by taking something and putting it into practice. So that's the meaning of the word praxis. Thank you for that question.
Are there any and thank you, Kristen, for that explanation. So there's another question. Are there other ways to partner with Fair Chance to have organizational help if we do not meet the requirements of this specific year-long partnership? Do you offer small seminars? Great question. One of the things that we are doing over the course of 2018, and that is preparing to enhance our network services. And that would be offerings that we have within our network, as well as and network within our network, meaning specifically those organizations that have completed one of our programs. We are also looking at workshops and activities that we can engage organizations that have not completed one of our programs. So we don't have that ability just yet, but we are working and building towards that so that we can offer some degree of support to organizations that are not in one of our programs. And I hope that that answers your question. If not, please let us know. Kristen, did you have anything you'd like to add? I see we're a little beyond the hour, and we can take any other questions and wrap it up.
Okay, great. Well, I would just add to what you said, Gina. If you're a little bit on the fence about whether you think that you qualify or not, there's some things that we are very firm about, like you have to have your 501c3 status. You can't just have a fiscal agent. But sometimes executive directors may kind of look at things and not see the full picture, and so of whether they qualify or not. So I'd really encourage you to call Anjali Nagpal. I'm moving the slide back up to her name. If you're on the fence about whether you think you qualify, or if you have any questions about how do I answer this question in the application, please do reach out to Anjali Nagpal, and she will help you. Her email is there too. Email is the best way to reach Anjali.
And I'd like to add just one quick thing, which is that I really think that applying for Fair Chance and the partnership is one of the greatest things that you can do to serve the youth that you serve, because of what they can do to your organizational capacity and how they can ultimately improve your program services.
I think we'll let that be the last word, unless I don't see another question. Again, this is Gina Fulbright-Powell, Director of Programs here at Fair Chance. I thank you very much for your time, your attention, and your interest in enhancing the capacity of your organization. I think we're all in here together to
make life better for children and youth living in poverty. And as Kristen said, if you have questions after you leave this call, please direct those to Anjali. We look forward to receiving your application. Thank you very much.